Hey Ryan, we don't normally see you at these.
Hey guys. Yeah, maybe it's a little selfish, but I'm making good progress on the quest so far, so I haven't had too many questions to ask.
No, that's good.
Which quest? 7?
Yeah, I finished 7 already, but I figured I would I would see if I could answer any questions this time.
Yeah, I just
Yeah,
started on.
I have a question actually. I haven't gotten too far into it, um, but the main thing that I was a little confused about was the Sentinel, not node, Sentinel thing.
Template?
Yeah. So that doesn't go like into the queue at all, right? It's just something that we return if something
Yeah.
goes wrong or if it tells you. Because I was for some reason getting this impression that like when I um, pop something off the queue or DQ something that I should replace that spot with the Sentinel or something.
Yeah, I thought the same thing at first with like, because it's similar to like the linked list implementation where you like start off with a Sentinel node.
Hmm.
Um, but it sounds like it's basically just like a placeholder to return something if you have an empty queue.
Okay.
So other than that, like you can index your queue from or your queue from 0 and everything will work out you expect it to.
And when you're DQing things, the way I was, because it talks so much about like sort of the efficiency of using this circular buffer. I was
Yeah,
thinking that when you DQ something, you actually sort of just like move head to the next spot and tail to the next, or no, tail would stay in the same spot. So you're constantly sort of like shifting around this circle is, but then I was getting errors. So maybe that's not the right. It just seemed like I shouldn't be when I DQ, I shouldn't be like erasing the thing that's there and then like shifting everything because that seems like it would be a lot of efficiency lost having to like move everything all of the time.
right.
How did you do
Um,
it?
I guess like so like head and tail like aren't actually like values, I guess, like how they were in the linked list where they represent like nodes. Like they're just like storage places for like indexes. So it's just like, like we resize the array or we size the array, but the queue is not necessarily the size of the vector.
Right.
And so we just use head and tail as like the sort of the pseudo size. And so I actually didn't change head at all. I would always just leave head at index 0 because even if you like, erase what's currently there, it looks like the vector will just shift everything down to then like head will still be 0 and it'll just put the next element in at position 0. But obviously the thing shrinks, and so you have to find some way to change the size. But I guess the best hint I can give you is that I did not change the head. If that kind of narrows it down.
Okay, so like saying, so head though is where things get DQ'd from, right? Because that's the front of the queue.
Yeah, yeah, from the front.
So the thing I was thinking about was like when you DQ something, now you have that empty space right there. So
Mhm.
that's why I was thinking you would, instead of shifting everything down, you would just move head one forward. But you're saying you didn't do that.
Well, what I did, I guess there's one way to do it where you'd like clear the space and then like just shift up. As you say, so you're within the vector continuum and you're starting at the beginning. You're saying you clear that value. Let's say it was like 50 and you put it to 0, and then you shift head up and then it's like shifted farther into the vector continuum.
Yeah.
That's one way to do it. I actually didn't even think of that. What I did is I just found the vector method like for erase, and I just completely deleted the spot. And then it
Oh,
just
just
shifted everything
deleting.
down.
Okay, so that doesn't like reallocate or anything like that? Because that's sort of what he was talking about, was like wasting time with like reallocating whenever you're resizing and stuff like that. Does erase just like kill that spot basically without moving things around?
I think so, because this implementation worked and I didn't touch head at all.
Okay.
But that could be a way to do it, actually. I didn't even consider moving it within the vector continuum. I just tried to like use as many of like the vector methods as I possibly could, because I found that at least like in CS2A when I was building the stack, that was the easiest way to do it.
Okay, yeah, I may have just been overthinking it. I was thinking like with modulo and stuff, you could just like shift where head and tail are, and then eventually it would wrap back around and fill in those spots that you DQ'd earlier. But it's like
Yeah,
way more complicated. I was getting a lot of errors. So
that's a good point. Yeah, that you could probably do shift it through the vector continuum, and then like effectively, it would be like if you like got towards the end, you would still be able to reuse the space, right? Because you wrap around, and then essentially
yeah,
like within the vector, the tail is in front of the head, but like within the way that you access the queue, it's still okay. I didn't even think of that implementation. Huh. That would probably work though, I would think.
well,
But maybe the testing
keeping
side
it
might
simple
fall
is
through.
probably the best way to go.
Yeah.
Cool, thank you.
Sorry, I just came in the middle. So Ryan, you never changed your head. That doesn't, to me, it doesn't make sense because it's a queue, because the moment you pop the queue, your head needs to go to the next location after that, right? That's, I mean, unless maybe I'm envisioning it differently, because it's first in, first out, right? So so that
Let me
doesn't make
think.
sense to me of how your head doesn't change, because if it's first in, first out, let's say, for instance, your first location is 0, your head is pointing to 0, then you pop that location, but the next item is on 1. So I would think that the head would go to 1, right? I mean, that's the next, so everything's sort of shifting all around.
I think what it was is like I think if you use the erase, you call like a vector method erase. I think it
Oh, the
like
vector
deletes the
method.
spot entirely.
Okay.
And so what it does is I think it just essentially shifts everything down. And so like,
It's already doing it for you. Okay,
yeah. And so it just puts the new thing at position 0.
I see.
So it
Interesting.
becomes a new head.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, I guess that makes sense then.
Yeah.
You just set it to to the header though afterwards, right?
Can you repeat what you said?
You would like set it to the header after you call erase, right?
I guess it
Or
will.
does it just go to the
Well, the head
header?
is not like a proper pointer. It's just sort of like a
Yeah.
conceptual reference to the 0 index, or I guess where you choose to start indexing it. And so like when you do the shift down, like because head's not pointing to the actual value that was in the queue, like it just accepts the next value that's in position 0.
All right.
So whatever was at index 1 is now at index 0, essentially is what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Do you shift every element? Like every single element that's inside the queue gets shifted by 1?
I believe that's what it's doing. I'm not like I don't know exactly how the erase method works. All I know is that it did work. So it sounds like that's probably what it's doing. Yeah.
I think that works for this quest. I think maybe his tests, like they don't test really big numbers such as like millions of elements or millions of members. But if you're pushing and popping for queue is like shifting every element, I feel like that might be a little bit slow in like if the vector is like really large.
That's sort of what I
that's a
was
good point.
thinking about when I was thinking about this like circular vector thing, is that it would be better to just like shift head and tail than shift every element. But I couldn't get that to work. So
Wait,
whatever works to pass the quest.
that's confusing again. Let's going back. You said you did the erase method, but does that resize the queue itself already automatically?
So I recite. So like if you think about how the size of the queue, like how it's like, like the equation for the size of the queue, I just affected one of the elements that determine the size of the queue. So like every time DQ is called, it will always remove only one element.
Right.
And
But if you,
so,
okay. If you say erase, does that, does the Q size or the vector size, actually in this case, the vector size go -1 or is the size of the vector still the same?
that's a good question. Let me, you know what? Maybe I can answer your question. I think it might stay the same, or maybe I'm thinking of vector clear. Hold on, let me look up vector.
No, vector
Erase.
clear is not, ooh, wait.
Vector
Unless you
clear would
did-
just empty the whole vector, sorry.
Right, unless,
But I wouldn't
unless you did
resize
vector clear on
it.
the,
So vector empty would reset it to 0.
Vector empty is just, it just checks a Boolean. So it says it checks whether the size is 0.
Yeah, that's true.
This does
Check.
actually say that
Mm.
erase does effectively reduces the container size by the number of elements removed, which are destroyed.
Oh,
But
really?
I don't know what
Interesting.
I don't know what effectively means in
Hmm.
that case.
Yeah, by
Because
empty I meant erase, but yeah.
don't the specs say something about like we should never resize unless we explicitly call the resize method? But you're saying it worked, right? Like you
It did
passed all
work, but
the quests.
I had this weird thing where, and the thing is, like, I can't tell whether or not it's as a result of these methods, because all these methods pass in like a reasonable like time. But then when I was building out my toString method, for whatever reason, it spun for like probably like a minute before I got the like ran out of patience before running out of cycles, like where it goes too long. But I got all the points for it.
Hmm.
And so I sent him an email about it, and he asked me if there's anything like, he asked me like, do I know if there's anything within my implementation that like might be causing the bug? And like, I was kind of like, well, no, like I don't know how to really do it any other way than the way that I did it. So if any of you guys do or don't encounter that problem, reach out to him and then like CC me on the email. Because I'd be curious to know, see like if maybe I did do something weird that was posing the issue, but yeah, I don't know.
Yeah,
But
'cause it
I did get
doesn't-
all the points for it, so I don't know.
Yeah, because again, what's happening under the hood, I guess, when you erase, if you do the vector dot erase, whatever method that is, I mean, it does effectively shift everything already under the hood. So that's
Right.
interesting. Hmm.
Yeah, it does seem to, based on what was said, it sounds like it shrinks the size of the vector by like one element.
Oh,
So I mean, it could potentially be a problem if you have like a really tight implementation. I guess you'd have to then resize it when you add something to it.
yeah.
So
Just to
I'm not
keep the
sure.
size. Okay.
Yeah. So
Okay.
I don't know exactly why, but the erase method did work for me. But maybe he'll see this like video because he watched the meeting. He'll be like, "Oh, that's not what I anticipated. Maybe that's why the issue is rising." But
Okay. Because I envisioned like moving my head pointers or something like that. But then, wait, how does that work? That wouldn't, no, I don't know. I haven't coded it yet. So,
yeah, I felt like Dylan, your description of it was pretty thorough. I felt like with like sort of moving it within the continuum of the vector, the Q, and then sort of even being able to wrap it around itself.
right.
Yeah, I haven't actually gotten that to work, but that was the thought that popped into my head when he has this like picture of
Yeah.
a circular buffer
Right.
moving around.
Without
Because you're right,
resizing,
the
it just
head
stays
and
as it is.
yeah, the head and tail are not actually pointers; they're just indices. So
Yeah.
you could just sort of move them around and.
Right.
But then I guess I don't know. I'm just thinking about like tail then would be eventually in front of head. And I'm not sure how that would affect you returning a size of this cube.
Oh yeah, I just realized that. I was like, would it still work with the sizing? Okay, interesting.
So that would be, well, I guess no. Tail would continue to just get bigger and bigger or smaller and smaller. But when you're inserting something, you say like tail modulo
Oh,
size.
right. Okay, yeah. So yeah, there
Your
would be
size
like
is still the same, right? Your location
Yeah.
will still be the same as long as you have that mod function.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I actually am not sure if the underlying vector is resized when you do erase, because here where it said about the iterator validity, it says all iterators, pointers, and references to elements before the position that's being erased are guaranteed to keep referring to the same elements that they were referring to before the call. So normally,
Interesting.
normally iterators get kind of invalidated when the structure of the vector changes because it doesn't know how far it can go anymore. But it's saying they, as long as it's before the one that's being erased. But it also says it effectively reduces the container size, which I'm not sure what that
Right.
means.
Hmm.
But I mean, if you got it to work, then it must be what he intended.
Yeah. Or or maybe I found like a way around it or something. 'Cause
Yeah.
it sounds like I broke it, but it gave me the points anyways. So
Well, I did break something in the previous quest and got points for it anyways. But when I resubmitted it, like you know how it's randomly generated, right?
Yeah.
So it must have like um it was doing something weird in like a certain direction. Like if it went like certain directions, but it must have just went all the same direction, which is why it was able to pass. So yeah, like in one instance it passed. Yeah.
Ryan, are there any of the mini
it was
quests,
pretty-
like the later on ones, that you struggled with, or any that were difficult that you could give some tips on?
One that I was kind of confused me was like where he talks about resizing the queue. He sort of like went on like a little spiel about like sort of like worrying about, I don't remember what the actual text was. It was like worrying about like shifting elements around or something like that, or like shifting the size. And I just did like I mean, I made it like really simple, like just like the namesake, and it worked. So I don't like, I don't know what he was talking about exactly there, because like I was just like, well, I'm gonna try the simplest, like Occam's razor, let's do the simplest implementation, and then if I get it wrong, then I'll review it. But it passed. So if you guys have more insight into that one, that'd be one I think would confuse me a little bit.
Yeah, sometimes simplicity is actually better. Like,
Yeah,
yeah.
that's what, yeah, right here, like it says like woo big. Like, I couldn't tell, like I was like, is he being sarcastic? Like, because he's just like using, it's just, I mean,
I
like
mean,
it's like the command isn't like, not to like give you guys the answer, but like the command I use is like is the namesake. Like I don't know how else to like make it.
yeah,
But
I
I
feel
found a way
like
to,
probably some of the quests have a little sarcasm in them.
yeah, well, he certainly got a sense of humor, and I think it makes it more fun. Um,
It's supposed to engage you more. That's how it works.
I think it does.
Wait, I don't
Like
understand this. It
pop a
says here
lot,
you need
right?
a new queue, resize a queue, create a brand new queue. But where? But
I felt like he was being sarcastic, to be honest with you guys, because like I was read this and I was trying to understand it, and I was like, all right, like I'm just gonna try the like literally like the most simplest implementation of resize is just, it's just
How many
resize.
points did you get? 1 point?
Probably like, yeah, 1 point. I don't even remember.
Yeah, I think that's sarcasm.
So I
you
think
mean
maybe
the
he was
brand
like,
new one when it says brand new queue? Is that
yeah,
what
like
create?
that's what I don't know what I was like, because like you take like all the elements and you put them on like a queue of like a smaller size, but I was like that, I don't know. I mean, I just did like literally the most basic implementation you can have, and it seemed like it worked. So
On the
that's
on the existing vector, right? It just the
yeah,
vector for that. Okay.
yeah,
So wait.
on data, yeah, on the data vector,
Yeah,
yeah.
the data vector. Okay. I was like,
So
It's so confusing because it's a brand new queue, but then it's like, where do you return it? Like, there's no,
Right. I
no
think, well, because
reference, nothing.
yeah, at the end he says like, see if you can find, I guess like the way that maybe he means that like that, like you would create a whole new, I don't know, like you would assign it back to the data queue. I don't know. But at the bottom he says like, see if you can find a cheaper way to do the same thing. Maybe that's like what essentially the resize like command is doing, I wonder.
Hmm.
But I don't know. I took this absolute simplest approach to this and it worked. So that's just my advice. Don't get too hung up on this one.
Okay.
And then maybe the other one, with to string, like just like, you know, just always got to pay attention to like the little tiny things. If you find like there's not like a weird difference, consider like where you're assigning the spaces. Like, are you assigning them at the start, at the end? So that stuff's hard to pick out. Like when you see the visual between like yours and his, just sort of play around with where you put the space. Like, do you have it go in? I don't know, just in different spots, especially if they look identical. That'd be my advice. And then the last thing I would say is you have one that's called Pop a Lot, where he passes you a queue and asks you to empty it. And my advice to you there is just to use the existing like removal methods and sort of like the different, I don't know what you call them. Maybe it's kind of an accessor, sort of, but yeah, I guess you'd call it an accessor, where you like test the qualities of the data structure. Basically, just use your existing methods for accessing your own, like your queue class when he passes you another instance of a class. Would be my advice for that one.
Okay, cool. That sounds pretty straightforward.
I mean, I thought like certainly like with like tree and even with like towers of Hanoi and stuff, like they would take me like a really long time, like several days of like pretty intense work. I think this one in total probably took me like a day and a half. So like the hardest part, of course, is just like where you're kind of like you grind through it all and then you gotta look back and look for the small stuff. But in terms of like difficulty and then like total amount, it was like 150 lines. So
Okay, cool. That's good. That's good to hear.
Actually, I put something on Reddit. I think I got some answers, but I wanted to make sure I understand. It was a syntax on the Sentinel. Just share that. I just didn't understand the syntax. It's this one.
I got an answer from a
Yeah, I don't know
sentence
what that
corrector bot, like a grammar corrector bot.
answer for what?
Yeah, what's your question?
Okay, so yeah, I didn't understand what this Sentinel, this line is, because it gets assigned a some T function. I was like, okay, what is that? So
That's just the default constructor for whatever T is in that case. It could be an int or a class of some kind.
yeah,
It's
I guess
just
that's what threw me off by the answer on the Reddit. It was some constructor, and I was like, oh, what constructor? The T is that template or that type name that we're referring to, and but what I guess this is something under the hood, like it's a default constructor, I guess.
yeah.
And maybe it just signs, if it's a char, it's a 0, I don't know, empty string. If it's an int, it's 0. Is that what it is? Or I'm
Well,
not
it
sure.
doesn't, it probably doesn't really do anything with your basic not classes, types, ints and chars and stuff like that. I doubt it does anything consequential.
Mhm.
But you know, if this was a queue of trees or something like that,
Yeah. Okay.
you would want it to default initialize those to make sure that any parts of those classes are also set up the way they're supposed to be before you
Mm.
start using them. Because you're going to be passing this Sentinel back to people when something goes wrong and you want it to be like correct, whatever that means, correct. So that if they start using the Sentinel, if they start calling the methods and stuff that start accessing its own members and stuff like that, that it's all set up.
So I guess I'm not sure if it's in compile time or in runtime when the user decides to say my type name is, let's say type is int. And so because at this point we don't know. And so I don't know if it's in compile time or runtime, but the moment they create a new object and they decide that t is going to be int. So I guess around that time, that's when Sentinel gets assigned this default, whatever that is. If it's int, I'm assuming it's 0. I mean, again, I don't know. Not sure
I
what's
think so. I think the
happening there.
default constructor for int is 0.
Yeah,
Right.
that sounds right.
The moment a user says, I guess it's during runtime, I would think, when they say, okay, create a new object with ints, queue of ints or something. And then at
Well,
this
it
point,
would
it's,
be their compile time,
oh, okay.
because the compiler is what's going to make this into an actual instantiation,
Yes, you're right.
not a
You're right.
template.
Okay. Okay. But again, we don't have to do anything. This is just something that's needed to define a static, I guess. I mean, since this is static, I
Yeah,
guess this is the syntax to how to default these values, maybe. I don't know.
yeah. I asked him about it in the last one because I was also kind of curious about the placement of that. Seems sort of
Mhm.
strange to me.
Uh-huh.
I guess it's just to make sure that, like, even if you made a queue and then immediately did something that returned the sentinel without you having set the sentinel to something specifically, it's already sort of like safe. It returns you something safe.
Oh, okay.
Because I was sort of thinking, wouldn't this make more sense for that line to be in set sentinel so that, like,
Right.
whenever you set it, then it calls whatever default constructor you need in
Mhm.
there. But
Mhm.
I guess this is just that case in case, you make a queue and you've never even touched set sentinel, you want it to be safe,
Okay.
whatever that return value is.
At least we have a value set in place.
Yeah.
Is this all in the header file? Because, or this part of this is the class file, CPP file, and is this like the header file, or I'm not sure how this is.
I wrote it all in the header file.
Oh, really? Okay.
He said something I think about, like, I don't know why he said that it can be a little
Yeah.
difficult with templates to put them in. You have to like keep them all in the header file, I think, when you're working with templates.
Yeah, I don't remember, but
Oh.
there's some like funky way you can get templates to be in separate, a CPP and a
File.
H file, but it's kind of like hacky. I think this is the way that people typically do their templates, is all in one file.
So you pretty much put everything in the header file, okay, with template. Oh, okay. Huh.
But I still do have mine like separated, like I have
CPP.
the implementation is at the bottom, the
Oh, here.
interface is at the top. So I just have like what he has written there and then separate.
Separate over here in the
I
bottom.
didn't do all of those functions inline or anything like that.
Right here inside the public. You actually put your implementation down here.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, one thing to also note, like you'll notice that for whatever reason, every time you write a new function, you have to start it with template type name T. So like right there, he says, like if you see it says template type name T, and then he goes into the queue constructor. For every single subsequent function that you write for the class queue, you have to also add template type name T above it.
Like for instance, peak, right? Did you have to do that? Template type
You'll
name
have to
T?
do it for any of the function, all of those functions, you'll have to write it above.
Oh, even DQ? Like you have to put template type name T in front?
On top.
Oh, on top, like this. Okay.
Yeah.
Just like that. Oh, okay.
And you have to
It
do
makes
it
you
like that where it
redefine-
says QT instead of just Q.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, right there.
Uh-huh.
You have to, for whatever reason, it makes you redefine the template like every single time you use it.
Uh-huh.
I don't know why. Maybe it's just like a safety thing, like in case you have other templates, but I don't know. But that's just a thing you have to do.
So you have to repeat it for every function you have to define. Okay. All right. Even string. Okay, 2-string. You have to put the template. All right. Yeah, trying to find this on Google or what? It's just kind of unless they have it on that LOSEF modules, because I haven't read. And maybe they get into detail about template.
Yeah, they do. I
Okay,
can link that here.
I see. Okay. Yeah, because finding on Google was a little bit difficult for me.
I think I thought would be kind of interesting would be to take out like our old existing data structures and reconfigure them for templates.
Mhm.
This is something I might give a crack at later, but I'm worried it'll take a lot of time.
Ah. Yeah, these things take a while for me. Okay. All right.
Hmm. Anything we should look out for? Like in the well, any mistakes that could be possibly made in this quest.
I think I've hit most of them. So I just talked about, you know, applying Occam's razor to a resize.
Alright.
Using the built-in or the functions you create for Q for Populot. And then I guess the last one was don't be afraid to like call your methods by doing like using a this pointer. So like some of them, like you're operating on the Q class and you're accessing items within Q, but the vector methods that you would apply to the data vector aren't the same as the ones that you'd want. Like for example, like is empty for the Q and is empty for the vector are two separate things, but you have an implementation for your Q class. And so don't be afraid to use like the this pointer to access your Q methods, like on the classes that the method's called upon.
Alright. Good to
Um,
know.
Yeah, so that's probably all the advice I have. I think it's relatively straightforward. And if you have questions, you can always just ask in the subreddit, but I think you guys will get it pretty fast, I think.
Yeah. I guess at this point it kind of boils to if you can get the concept rather than like, well, if you make it to this point in the class and
Yeah, but
knowing about your code.
it has seemed to get a little bit simpler, but sort of loftier concepts.
Yeah. All right.
Yeah, I'm gonna hop off, but thank you for all the advice.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Yeah, guys, I
Yeah.
think we can call it today. And if
All right.
anybody needs more help, you guys just post in the subreddit.
All right, appreciate it.
Right.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Cool.
Happy Memorial Day.
See you guys.
Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah.